Hello players, welcome back to part 2. Yes, this is part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, this whole story might be lost on you. As always, everything that I mentioned will be in the video description, and there's going to be a lot of links down there, so yeah, sorry about that. When it comes to home entertainment, visuals are only half the story. Great sound is just as crucial. You could go for a soundbar, which is a popular and valid choice. It's perfect for smaller spaces and can still pack a punch. For those of you looking for a little bit more of an immersive experience, you can consider a home theatre system. These systems typically include multiple speakers and a subwoofer that you can place around your room. They're ideal for large spaces and viewers who enjoy movies and games with really dynamic audio. Now, unfortunately, the audio on most TVs is pretty bad, and ironically, the higher end you go with TVs, typically the sound is worse. Usually because they try and make the more expensive TVs as thin as they can, and in doing so, they don't leave any room for decent speakers. There are some gimmicks like Samsung and Sony which have vibrating screens to produce better sounding audio, but they are gimmicks, and while sometimes they can make things sound better, well, even that is up for debate, they won't be any match for a real sound solution. When it comes to soundbars, there are a lot of options out there, and the truth is you typically pay for what you get. Something around the $200 price range will get you something that sounds not too bad and definitely better than what comes built into the TV. The $300 to $500 range will take you up a step, and this is probably the mid-range for a decent soundbar. When you get over $500 but below $1,000, you typically get the same soundbar quality, but usually with added surround and speakers and a sub, either wired or wireless. The $1,000 mark, or around that sort of area, is where you're going to typically find the top end from the likes of Sony or Samsung, and of course they do go above that, sometimes a few hundred more for added surrounds and a subwoofer, and then you've got the crazy brands like Sennheiser and Bang & Olufsen. Full home theatre audio systems are typically more expensive, usually because they make up more parts. So a soundbar typically combines a left, right and up firing speakers and a centered channel, and maybe some other speakers depending on your model. Full home theatre audio system will have a dedicated speaker for each one of these audio channels, and it's important to place these in the most optimal places in the room. Soundbars typically have to emulate where the sound is fired from, with Dolby Atmos. With a full system, you'll have speakers either in the ceiling or in the top corners of a room. Soundbars are typically easier to set up because with a home theatre system, you usually also need an amp, and all of the speakers, either wirelessly or wired, would connect to the amp, and the amp would either connect to the TV via ARC or eARC, and all of the devices to the amp. And then you would have one or multiple feeds from the amp going to the TV. Now, I'm not the best person to be giving advice on which soundbar or sound system is the best, but I can definitely give you the information you need. If you do finally narrow it down to a couple of model numbers, again, check out Artings because they are really good at covering this kind of stuff. You will see a lot of debate online about what's best, wired versus wireless speakers. I use a Samsung system with wireless speakers and a wireless subwoofer, and I've never had any issues. Having said that, of course, wired speakers are going to be more reliable and less susceptible to interference. Interference is very rare, but it can happen. Linus had a great video of him spending way too long tracking down interference issues with these Sony wireless speakers. So you've heard me mention ARC and eARC a lot, so let's go over what they mean. ARC stands for Audio Return Channel, and it was introduced with the HDMI 1.4 standard. It allows for the transfer of audio from the TV back to the audio system over a single HDMI cable. This means if you're watching content directly on the TV, such as from built-in apps, the audio can travel upstream to your sound system, allowing you to use your external speakers without needing an additional audio cable or an optical or coax cable. For eARC, the E means enhanced, and it is an advancement over ARC and was introduced with the HDMI 2.1 standard, sort of. It retains all of the benefits of ARC and is designed to handle higher quality audio formats like Dolby True HD. eARC can have better audio synchronization and supports automatic lip sync, and eARC can work with earlier HDMI standards, but for full functionality, both the TV and the sound system must support eARC. And there's a poor little orphan, the optical cable. You'll also see this referred to as the Toslink cable. That's because it was originally developed by Toshiba in the 1980s. It's pretty much reached the limits of what it can do. Optical can only provide stereo or compressed 5.1 surround in either Dolby Digital or DTS, and that's it. If you want to play up-to-date audio standards, you'll have to toss-link this back into the drawer of cables that you might need someday. HDMI 2.0 or ARC can do everything that the optical can do, but also Dolby Digital Plus, which is an enhancement over Dolby Digital that supports increased bit rates and up to 7.1 channels. It's important to note that not all ARC implementations will support Dolby Digital Plus, as it depends on the TV and the sound system's capabilities. eARC can do all of that, and Dolby True HD, which is a lossless format commonly used in Blu-ray discs. It can also do DTS Master HD audio, which is another lossless audio format which again is found in Blu-ray discs, and Dolby True HD, which is how you get the full Dolby Atmos. More on that in a minute. It can also do multi-channel LPCM, which supports up to 7.1 channels of uncompressed audio. Now again, just because eARC supports all of those things, it doesn't necessarily mean that your device will, just because it has eARC. Now back to the Dolby Atmos. Dolby Atmos is the name of a surround sound technology which uses an object-based audio format that adds height channels to surround sound, causing a 3D sound effect. It can be delivered in a couple of ways. The best way is via Dolby True HD, which will get you uncompressed full Dolby Atmos. Well, as full as it can be in a home setting. Real movie theaters will still have the upper hand. Dolby Atmos can be delivered via Dolby Digital Plus, however this is a compressed version of Dolby Atmos and you will not be getting the highest quality from Dolby Digital. Dolby True HD is available in some Blu-ray discs depending on how they were mastered, but most of the time Dolby Atmos will be delivered via Dolby Digital Plus, via all of the major streaming services. The streaming services believe that the bandwidth is too high to deliver Dolby Atmos in Dolby True HD, although you may find some exceptions to that. To get the most out of Dolby Atmos, it's best to have additional what's called satellite speakers, in addition to a soundbar, or if you have a home theater setup, then you would already have those dedicated speakers. But Atmos is just one audio format, and there's a few, and I'll run through them as quick as I can because each one of them will be important. Okay, so there's stereo, which is supported by everything. There's a standard called Dolby Digital, which we've already covered, and there's DTS, which is a surround sound format, which is similar to Dolby Digital, but maybe with slightly less compression. Debates out on that one, and supports up to 5.1 channels. There's Dolby Digital Plus, which we've also covered, which only is supported in eARC technically, but it does appear in some ARC configurations as well. There's Dolby True HD, which is only supported on eARC and HDMI 2.1. Next is Dolby Atmos, which is the 3D surround one, but there's also DTS X, which you've probably never heard of, but that is the direct competitor to Dolby Atmos, and it provides a similar 3D surround technology. And there's also a couple of special Apple formats in there as well, which are kind of contained within the Apple ecosystem. It's important to know all of these formats exist because not every audio system is going to support every single audio format. Yeah, it doesn't get any easier, does it? DTS and DTS-X are often the ones that get overlooked, mainly because the manufacturers don't want to pay another licensing fee for their device. But DTS can be just as important as Dolby if you're watching something that is mastered in DTS for the surround sound. And if your system doesn't support DTS, then you're not getting surround sound. What you will get is stereo at best and silence at worst. Now, some of the early Sonos equipment didn't support DTS, and as a result would only play stuff that was mastered in DTS in stereo. I believe since there has been an update that has enabled DTS, but there's also been another update that's broken Sonos entirely. So there's that. You also have to be aware of what audio formats your TV supports as well, because if your TV doesn't support DTS and you're trying to send a DTS signal via ARC or eARC, you might have the same problem there. And it's a problem because you can't choose mostly how your content is delivered. There's a lot of stuff in the late 90s and early 2000s that was mastered in DTS where it was the preferred track a lot of the time. And DTS and DTS-X are of course used a lot less frequency than any of the Dolby stuff, but it's still in a lot of stuff and it's still out there. This is where things can get a little bit messy because if your TV will do a straight pass-through, audio pass-through to your sound system, without touching anything, that's great. But some TVs insist on messing with the audio signal before it gets to your sound system. And if that's the case and your TV doesn't support an audio format, it won't pass it through, or more likely, it'll try and convert it to one of the Dolby formats. So there are a couple of things you can do if ARC and eARC aren't playing nice with you. Or let's say your new sound system supports Dolby Atmos, but your TV will just refuse to pass it through. Instead of using ARC or eARC, you can connect directly to your soundbar or home theater system if it allows you to do so. A lot of the high-end ones and some of the mid-range ones will have an HDMI in for your devices and a video out which will go to your TV. So the sound system will process the audio first and then pass the video signal to the TV. Now logic would tell you that that may add some lag to your setup, which wouldn't be ideal for something like gaming, or cause some lip sync issues that you may have to sort out. But I've often found the opposite to be true, with ARC especially. It can introduce some lag into the video feed because it processes the audio within the TV, and if the TV isn't fast enough to do that quickly enough, then it delays sending the audio, making it just an absolutely useless mess for gaming. eARC, on the other hand, is miles better than ARC, and I haven't seen any reported issues with lag from eARC. If your soundbar doesn't support TV or video pass-through, you can get something like the HD Fury Arcana, which, I say something like that, technically that's the only one that does it. So you plug your device into the HD Fury and that splits off the video and audio signal, so you can have the full audio signal go into the soundbar that doesn't support video pass-through and send the video in its full output to the TV. And if you run out of HDMI ports, you can get something like an HDMI switch to add additional HDMI ports. However, this can get quite complicated quite quickly. If you use an HDMI switch or an HDMI matrix, that often comes with its own remote. Some of them will come with a remote, which is another input that you need to switch when you want to fire up your PlayStation or watch the Barbie movie. Also, HDMI switches also have their own limitations. Some are HDMI 2.0 only, some are HDMI 2.1 but with some caveats, and some allow the full HDMI 2.1 spec, and as you guessed, those are pretty pricey. The easiest setup you can do is the basic connect everything to your TV and run ARC or eARC to your soundbar or sound system and test for synchronization. If you start getting issues like lag or lip syncing and you can't fix them, then it will be time to look at other solutions like plugging devices directly into the soundbar or using something like the HD Fury. But start as simple as you can first. I have found this video to be the best for testing audio sync. It should beep when the ball hits the bottom. And speaking of test videos, I've also linked a selection of what I have found to be the best videos to make sure that you're getting the audio formats to play back correctly. Most systems will tell you which audio format they're playing back in, or they'll most definitely tell you that they're playing back in Dolby Atmos if they are. Video files are in the description and are a mix of Dolby True HD, Dolby Atmos 5.1, DTS and DTS-X. And I think there may be a Dolby Vision test in there as well. But hopefully that's cleared a few things up or made things a lot worse again. But do leave your comments, questions and suggestions below and I will follow them up in a part 3. But until then, keep playing and be excellent to each other.